Okay, let's do it. Go ahead, Daphne.
You guys asked if I was ready, and I was the only one not ready. All right, guys. Excuse me, with no further ado, welcome to the Power Hour of Business with Credit Ninja, Wendy Butler, and myself. Today we have a very special guest joining us. He is, in fact, coming from all the way on the other side of the world. So it's 5 a.m. over there. It is 5 p.m. Eastern time over here. And I remind you of that because, you guys, if you don't remember, the Power Hour of Business comes to you every single week, on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here exclusively on Chatter. And we do that with a live studio audience, so to speak. And we sure do appreciate every one of you that are here live with us today. I'm actually going to hand this over to our host Credit here to follow up here and really give Dan the introduction that he deserves, because he's a trademark attorney, and I want to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of expertise we're bringing to you today. Credit?
Very good. Thank you, Daphne. Appreciate it. But guys, we are here, a very important segment of Power Hour. We're here every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we talk about all things business. And one of the topics that we've been really struggling with as we're building our brands on these different platforms is, do you really own your name? Do you own your trademark? Do you own your intellectual property? And what are the things that you need to do in order for you to not only misstep, but also to prepare for any future things that come about, because your name is something that you build up, and it's an asset to what you're building in terms of business. So I met Dan about 4 years ago, right before the pandemic, and getting to know him and understanding that he does trademarks. And I'm actually a client of Dan's. I have sent a lot of clients to Dan because I trust him with the handling of the process. And I know a lot of people go, well, I can do my own trademark by going direct and all that. But you have to understand that sometimes you make the wrong mistakes. Sometimes you think you got the trademark, but you really don't. And for most people like myself, I'm extremely busy. I literally just came from a meeting to rush here. So time is money. And if you value your time and you would rather spend that time to build your business, because your hourly or the deal flow that you have is going to cost you more money trying to figure it out yourself. You're going to have to find someone, if it's not Dan, it's somebody else, to make sure that you get your mark and make sure that there's no one trying to steal your mark. And we've gone through several scenarios like that, and Dan's going to go through all the questions and concerns that you have in terms of building your business correctly, and also your exit strategy. Once you do build your company and you are creating revenue and traction and you're getting investors in, what is the next step as you're trying to exit your business? Are you going to be franchising it? Dan is also a franchise attorney. So you're able to either franchise it or you're licensing it, or all these different alternatives. So thank you, Dan, for coming in. I know you're super swamped and you're on the other side of the pond, as Daphne had mentioned. So when it's 5 o'clock over here Eastern, it's the other opposite. It's 5 in the morning over there. So thank you. I hope you had your coffee for the day. I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to you so you can do a brief introduction. And then let's go right into the topic of trademarks and intellectual property.
Hey, thanks, Leanne, the Credit Ninja. Hey, everyone, my name is Dan. I've been a business and trademark attorney since 2005. So, but despite my boyish looks, I'm a real attorney. My bar number is 247-738, so you want to look it up. The California State Bar. I've worked with business owners and entrepreneurs since 2007, helping them set up their company, helping them protect their intellectual property, and helping them scale and exit their business. And today I'm very excited to talk about trademarking and helping you protect your brand and all the things that goes along with it. It is kind of a lot of people think it's just filling up a form and getting it. Leanne talked about some of the mistakes, and I've had several calls just in the last week. Either people trying to do it themselves and they weren't successful, or they had thought they had got it, but when in essence they actually just submitted an application and really had not gone through the entire process. So I'm very excited to share with you my knowledge about trademarks, trademark law, and the trademark process, to use that unless you have the registered trademark with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Now, you may have seen that, the R in the circle, or maybe the TM, superscript TM. Superscript TM means what's called common law rights, which means it's not a registered trademark, but you're kind of staking your flag on it. So right now, if you don't have an official registration, but you have a name, slogan, even smells and sounds are able to be trademarked. You can use the
Rar.
you can use the superscript TM on your marketing materials, saying to others, "Hey, I'm staking a claim on this until you actually have a registered trademark." And having that registered trademark means you have the exclusive use, which sounds exactly what that sounds like. No one else can use that name in relation to whatever goods and services that you're selling. So it doesn't mean that you can only own the word or the phrase to everything in the entire world, right? But only associated with your goods and services that you're selling to the public.
And then, like, do you suggest that every business has this, or when do you suggest that a business has this?
I always say, or I always tell my clients or potential clients, say, you want to submit an application when you have what's called a bona fide intent to use, meaning when you have, and the good thing about trademarks is you don't need to be selling anything yet to submit an application. You just need to tell the government, yes, I have a legitimate intention to use this particular phrase or word, color, whatever it may be, and put in an application. The benefit of doing that is you cannot get your place in line and you're putting your flag up. Now, you still have to go through the process. The examining attorney still has to review your application. But if everything goes correctly in the way you want it to go, you would get kind of like a conditional approval. And at that time, you have about 2.5 years to bring your product to market or bring your services to market. So getting a registered trademark also means that you have to be in business using the name. They're not like domain names where you can just buy a bunch and just sit on them and hope you're going to hit the jackpot. It's not like that. You actually have to be in business using typically, using the name in business, but you can also license the name. That's a legitimate use, but you can't sit on a name and not do anything because the government says, we want to encourage people to use the name. We don't want people to sit on a bunch of names and not use it in business. And that's not really fair to not only the public, to other business owners, for people to own particular names, but not really monetize it.
When you use the more common law, your words, for the TM rather than the register, does that have to be done by application or just by using the TM? It kind of sets that in that timeline in motion.
Yeah, so merely by using the name or phrase or logo, you already have automatic rights, common law rights. So there's what we call unregistered rights. So you have some rights in the name, but you don't have. Think of a federal registration as like a really big sword that you can wave around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And say, hey, this is mine. You better stop using this name. It's a bigger sword than if you had unregistered, just using the TM.
No, that's awesome. What does it typically cost a business, and is it worth the money?
Yeah, is it worth the money? It really kind of just depends. Obviously, I'm particularly biased. I've seen, help clients with this registration. I've seen businesses have. Let me put it this way: one of my very first clients I've helped, they came to me and said, "Hey," and they weren't very big, but they had a really really good name for their business, and they kind of wanted to expand into another tangential line of a line of goods. And I told them, like, they asked them, hey, what's it worth to you? So I'm willing to spend 5 figures for it, 5 figures for this particular trademark, right? And so that's when I kind of realized, oh wow, this is like, it became real. Of
Yeah.
right, it's like, okay, now there's some names, powerful brand names are something other businesses are willing to spend. And my client, they couldn't get into that line of goods and services because if they had started selling in that particular line, they would have been infringing on this particular trademark. And so it can be very valuable. There's lots of companies out there that they actually only own the name. I think one of them is called Authentic Brands. They only own, and they just license the name out. Probably brands that you've heard of already. They're just owned by one company, and
Really?
and they just license the name out. Yep.
Now that that actually makes sense. So that's what they do, for example, when you want to use a team, like a sports team, right? A licensee, things like that.
Yeah, so replica jerseys, or when I was growing up, Baskin Robbins used to do this baseball, like you serve the ice cream cup, ice cream in the baseball helmet. I,
Cool.
I used to I used to collect those. Yeah,
You're old,
the
Dan.
company.
You're old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I grew up trying to collect as much of those as I can. The companies that manufactured those kind of small helmets needed to get permission from Major League Baseball and the teams and negotiate a licensing deal to use those baseball teams on the helmets. And this is kind of the other side of trademarks, is that not only you can protect your brand, but you can monetize it. So licensing is one of the ways to monetize it. Being able to use your logo name onto other different products. And that's another stream of income, and how to increase the value of your brand in addition to preventing others from using it.
Was a great way to cash limit.
I have a question for Dan. What type of companies do you represent? Is there a range of different type? Is it services, products, or are there certain companies that you stay away from? I mean, I just want to know so that people know what your abilities are.
Yeah, so I've trademarked brands from restaurants to clothing. So I've worked a lot, across the board. One of the more challenging areas is cannabis, just because in California it's legal, but at the federal level it's illegal. So there's lots of like things you got to go through and consider when getting trademarks in that particular industry. So it's more challenging, and not to say trademark is completely straightforward, but a lot more challenging to get it in the cannabis industry. But clothing is a very popular one. We just did fish sauce for another one. So reps to my people and Leanne for fish sauce here. Worked across yeah. So we work from food and beverage, and clothing, and so lots of different industries, just to see how pervasive and powerful protecting your brand can be, because it does affect pretty much anything that has a public face to it, has a reputation to it. Um, Trademarking and brand protection is really important.
Well, bringing it a little closer to home, because we obviously have been talking about trademarks quite a bit with podcasters and in chatter. A lot of people are asking questions about that. That's why we were so excited to have you on today. So one of my questions to you, Dan, is that there are a lot of common names. Like, for instance, we use the Power Hour, and that is used, like if you go on YouTube, it's everywhere. If you see it very commonly. Can you trademark Power Hour or common names? Are there some kind of rules around those kind of things that we need to be aware of?
Yeah. Good question. And this particular issue came up a couple of years ago. So I'm a big basketball fan. I'm from Southern California, and so I'm a Lakers fan, and so I'm very glad that the Lakers got Luka Doncic over the last 2 weeks. But if you remember, LeBron James tried to trademark Taco Tuesday a couple of years ago. And a lot of people were upset, and he was unsuccessful. And one of the reasons why he couldn't is Taco Tuesday. Long story now, so you can't get it, but generally, kind of popular phrases that is in part of slang, part of our kind of American lexicon. Those are not, we call it trademarkable or registrable, just because it's a common phrase. That's really what it comes down to. And again, the government is saying like, hey, it's not really fair for one person or one company to own this particular phrase because it's just a common saying. And on the flip side, you may not want it because it's so common, it kind of loses its power and appeal. One of the issues that can arise is that if your brand is kind of weak, you may get a registration, but if it's weak, then the registerability can be attacked, and the government, someone that can sue and say, hey, this should not have been given a trademark. So there's a risk that is associated with trying to register something. So
Gotcha. Now, let me ask you this also. For international law, you were saying that the R means that it's a registered trademark for the US, but what about using it internationally?
yeah, so some countries use that R in the circle as well. Trademarks are typically on a country by country basis. So each country you go to, you will most likely have to register with that particular government. And obviously, each country's laws are different. So one of my clients, typically when we do have to explore international franchising, right? They're a company based in the United States. They have a very great concept. They have a couple of franchisees in the United States, and they have a United States trademark, and they want to explore going abroad, right? So now we have to see, okay, one of the first steps is, how do we get trademark protection in that particular country so that no one, can use the name. If I recall correctly, Burger King tried to enter Australia, and there is actually a Burger King there already. So they could not get the name Burger King because someone beat them to it. And so I don't know if there's any Australians here and they can tell us the exact story, but my understanding is that it operates under a different name. But the same kind of logos and kind of theme that we would, if we us as Americans would go down, would understand. But they cannot use Burger King down there because someone else beat them to it.
Now that lends me to another question. I've got to just throw it in here before we get too far. It makes me think of the gas stations, Quick Trip and Quick Trip, right? There's well, you're probably not going to be familiar, but here in the U.S., in the States, we have they're two very, very large brands, and they're both gas stations, but they're spelled differently with the Quick QU and then the KW and IK, by the way, for those listening. But yeah, so something like that. What is you said? Well, if it's not the same goods and services, what if it's the same name but it's spelled different like that?
Yeah. So sometimes it's about enforcement. So these particular businesses, maybe they don't care, right? And so they're just maybe collecting their, counting their money in the back room with those card counting machines, and sometimes they don't care. Sometimes, and it may be the case here, is that some names are not registered. So with the trademark office, one of the kind of boxes that have to go through when examining an application is this phrase or word or whatever is being applied for, is it strong or is it weak? So there's a spectrum that they look at. So weak trademarks in terms of phrases are the first kind of level that doesn't get any protection are generic words like pizza, car, home, right? So you sell pizzas, like again, like it's not fair for one person to own the word pizza, right? Because it's kind of a generic term. So the government won't allow you to own only that particular word in relation to pizzas. Now the next level up is descriptive, right? And so typically it's something that describes the goods or services like quality foods or delicious burgers, things of that nature, or geographically descriptive. California burrito is one that kind of comes to mind. So descriptive phrases, descriptive words that typically don't get afforded protection. So when you're thinking of a brand, you kind of want to stay away from that part of the spectrum. Now, we're in the middle, it's called suggestive. This is kind of where you don't want to go kind of past this, which is the consumer has to make one mental leap, one mental step in thinking about the name. So like Microsoft. Well, we all know Microsoft today, right? Because computers and operating systems. But just trying to think of Microsoft like 40 or 50 years ago, whenever it was started, we didn't know what the heck that was. We know what that means. But we came to know as that related to the computers and software. But we had to think about it, right? Make the association. So that's what a suggestive name is. The next strong one is arbitrary. So these are real words. These are words that appear in the dictionary, but they really don't have any connection or any association to what they're selling. So the one example I like to use in my book is Apple. Apple for computers. Now we all know Apple for phones and music and laptops, but again, take yourself back to the 80s, 70s, and 80s. This is a funny name. Why is this company called Apple, right? But it's kind of nonsensical if you think about it, right? So that's a really strong brand, a really strong trademark in terms of getting registerability and getting brand protection, because it's kind of arbitrary in a sense. And the next really strong one, and so if you can hang around here or suggestive, arbitrary is fanciful. So these are made up words that don't appear in the dictionary. And these are the strongest trademarks, and it's really easy for the examining attorneys to go, oh, okay, this is a strong trademark. We can check this part off, examine this examination process, and move over to the next examining criteria. So these words, again, made up words that don't have any particular meaning
Like
anywhere. Skibbity, right? Xerox is a very popular one.
Oh yeah.
Does it, right?
You know what? We just have a hot mic. We got it. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Dan happens sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
Keep
Yes.
going.
Yeah, so arbitrary, fanciful words are really the best types in terms of strength and trademark. And those, if you get a successful registration, those are harder to attack in a sense and lose a registration. So you have a strong foundation if you kind of stay in that part of the spectrum.
So, do the trademarks expire, or once you have your trademark, you're done, or do you have to continue? Is it like my GoDaddy? I've got to every year pay some more money to keep my domain.
Yes, yes. So, the government always wants its thing, right? And so you got to feed the machine here. And so once you get a registration, you have to renew it between the 5th and 6th year, and then between the 9th and 10th year of the anniversary. So again, as long you have to be using it. So if you're not in business anymore, then there's no basis for you to renew it. But if you're in business, you can theoretically renew it indefinitely so long as your company keeps going and it's getting renewed.
Is an average cost for a trademark? I'm just curious, like for a brand new business starting out, they're going to call you up and they just want a basic trademark. I have no idea. What is the cost?
Yeah, so obviously you can do it for free just to pay the filing fee. If you're going to do it on your own directly with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, the LegalZoom is very popular. One of the things, and I've fixed a handful of self applicants. So one of the things that you got to understand is, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, is like a lot of people think it's just filling out forms, and I would say that's probably just the easiest part. There's a lot of kind of pre-work you got to get into, a lot of analysis that goes into in preparing the application. Like that whole thing I told you about, what's a strong trademark, so what's a weak trademark, that takes some brain power sometimes.
It's a lot like setting up an entity, right, Dan? I mean, you kind of, it's not just filling out the paperwork. There's a lot of context around it. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. There's a lot of context around. There's a lot of pre-work done before we start putting the metaphorical pen to paper. And then how do you own how do you own it? A lot of companies will own intellectual property in another company. So this is what Amazon does. They hold their intellectual property in a separate company, right? And the way royalty income is taxed different from retail sales is different. And so what they do is one company owns all the intellectual property, and then they pay that company a bunch of money for royalties for use of the trademark. And so now they only have royalty income, which in whatever, I think that particular company is based in the Caribbean or something, right? So it's tax. My understanding is like they tax it very low. So once you kind of for the average business owner is really not applicable. But I want to kind of share with you how bigger companies are using intellectual property to increase the revenue and lower the taxes and monetize it. But in terms of cost, you can range anywhere from there's even attorneys that that don't practice trademark law, and they're really not, they're doing their clients kind of a disservice in it. Yes, we've all kind of had to start somewhere. Trademark law is not one of those things that you can kind of just dive in without at least reaching out to a colleague for help. So I think you'll find anywhere from like $500 from the local guy who can do it for you. From the big firms will charge $5,000 or $7,000 to it. There's a wide range to it in terms of total cost, and also depends on how well your application is, and two, if you kind of get a little bit of kickback in terms of, pushback from the trademark office. So how the process goes is, we submit an application. Unfortunately, it's taken about 9 to 12 months to get assigned to an examining attorney, and then if everything goes well, in the worst case scenario, you'll get a registration in about 9 to 12 months. The best one we did was 6 months, and this one was a referral from Leanne, and I couldn't believe it that we got that fast in that amount of time. But sometimes the trademark office has questions, or they'll say, "Hey, hold on, there's some issues here," and now the costs start to go up because now we have to respond to these particular, right? And so total cost can be tens of thousands of dollars to it. So it's very important that a lot of the pre-work is done, and do the comprehensive search to clear out the mark to see if there's any potential conflicts. Because I just had the consult the other day, and they applied for themselves. They called me and says, "Hey, We applied for it. There's a conflict, and I gave him, it's like, hey, yeah, most likely the changes, you can't change this, and it's very difficult. I'm not saying possible because I've seen the impossible done, but it's very challenging. It's going to cost you a lot to try to overcome the objections that they have to try to get a registration. So we strategize what are the chances are, how much resources are you willing to put into it. Obviously, as an attorney, I'm not allowed to make any particular guarantees about outcome, but I can kind of make educated guesses based on my experience and the law about your likelihood of success.
I can jump in real quick just to explain the scenario that I went through to get my digestive enzymes going with Ninja Flow. So I really didn't talk about it much on social media for a reason, because you don't want to put your mark out there and someone try to beat you to it. Secondly, as you are building your company, you want to be able to document the process. So if you are doing any type of meeting or seminars or events, make sure you document that, whether it's a brochure, whether it's videos that you did or any type of training materials. Make sure you keep all of that, because when someone like a Dan comes in and say, well, your trademark says on there that you're going to be doing teaching and books and seminars and literature and podcasts and blogs, where are they? And you're like, well, I didn't save them, or my dog ate it, or whatever it is. It's gonna make Dan or any of the trademark attorneys very difficult, because they can't create something for you when you don't even have it, because the trademark attorney is going to ask, show me proof that you did these trainings, because that's what Dan asked me and said, well, if you do these training, you want that as one of your subcategories. What is your training material that you did 5 months ago? And I had to go back, and thank God I have it on my iPhone. And so use your iPhone when you are, screenshot it, save it, put it in your files, and create a folder that says seminars or something. And that way, or put it in your Google Drive. So when Dan asks you, you can go back there and retrace it, because it was easier for me to do that. If I had none of that stuff, I wouldn't have gotten my trademark. And Dan goes, I'm sorry, but they rejected that category. The only thing you can have is supplement, and that's going to actually cut me off of the ability to do events or blogs, because I don't have that subcategory, and somebody else can come in and take the name, and they're going to go ahead and work that subcategory, and I can't do anything about it. So I just want to give you an example of the things I had to deal with. So as you are building your trademark, save the documentation, save those videos, save the literature, because you're going to need it, whether you're going to use an attorney or do it on your own or use Dan. So that's my big tip for everyone. Right, Dan? Was that right?
Absolutely. So one of the key factors of us getting that trademark in 6 months was we call it the specimen, is the proof that we have to submit to the United States Patent and Trademark Office that we're using the name, and we just can't submit anything, right? If you do blogs, we can't submit a water bottle as the proof. So the trademark office is very specific in terms of what they need, and I've seen a lot of applications get rejected or get issued an office action because the proof that they submitted was insufficient or the incorrect type of proof. And for a lot of people that do it on their own, this is kind of where they get hung up, and they just they don't complete the application. Now exposes their brand to get registered by a competitor. So it's very important that the trademark, there you go, Leanne is sharing her certificate that we got for her a couple of months ago. But it's very important that the proof be properly prepared and properly submitted, so that there's no question as to how you're using the name in business. So once you're lucky enough, I don't say luck, but once you submit the application and everything goes through. Right now, they issue digital certificates as a cost-saving measure, I suppose, but you are allowed to obtain a printed certificate from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So we ordered one for her, and had it delivered to her place.
Yeah, I'm gonna frame it and I'm gonna tattoo it to my ass. That's how much I appreciate you. So, I mean, I truly believe that when you're building a company, there's some pride in it. your name, really, you identify with your name, and it stays with you forever. So really put that in your budget, because we talk about building a business. There is budget for marketing. I know Wendy spends a lot on her brand marketing, events. I spend a lot on hosting events. Dan knows that. Whenever I'm traveling, I always like take people out. I took Dan out, took a lot of people out, but it's part of the business and it is a write-off. So when you are getting a trademark attorney, a CPA for your business, I get a receipt from Dan. So it's actually my business expense. It should cost you nothing because you write it off. So when you think about cost, it shouldn't even be a thought. Get with the right person. That's all I can tell you, because if there's a question that comes up regarding the brand, at least you can call someone. If you try
Mm-hmm.
to do it on your own, you're going to now have to go and search for an attorney anyway. So might as well start in the very beginning. So that's my thought. And just to add to that, Wendy when we were doing the podcast, she got an email from someone saying that stop using that name. Now, just as my thought is, it didn't come from an attorney. So if it came from someone sending you an email, do you take that serious or not, Dan? Or do you go, well, that's really not legit?
Yeah, obviously there's a little bit more credence when it comes from an attorney. So when I've sent these types of letters in the past, I want to be as sure as possible to know that if I'm sending it on behalf of my client, that they have the rights to it. Because the risk of sending that type of letter is what's called a declaratory action. What basically means is you open up yourself to getting sued to determine who the user is, who the true user is. Now, if you have the certificate like you have in your hand, it's going to be hard for someone to chat. Not impossible, but it's going to be like someone would think twice to sue Leanne for having it, because now she has presumptive rights. But if you don't have the certificate, you have a larger target on your back, and the ownership is kind of more questionable at this point. But if I'm sending it on behalf of a client, I want to be damn sure that they have the rights, because if they don't, my client has a risk of being basically sued to determine who is we'll call the prior user or the senior user of the trademark, unregistered trademark, and that can upend the whole business, their whole business world. And if you haven't gone through the cost of rebranding, it can be in the millions if you've invested a lot in your logo and your signs and, whatever beer koozies that you have. Now you have to get rid of those to the Goodwill because you can't use them, right? And so, yeah, so a lot of those things.
Okay, I haven't heard beer koozies for 30 years. Okay.
You haven't been to Alabama lately, okay? Senior Bowl had them everywhere.
Did that's crazy. Well, thank you for. Okay, so one question. When you are trying to fight your brand, and that happened to me with the other brand, Dan and I had to deal with something. Is first you stronger, or someone that got your trademark and branded after you? Which one is I mean, it depends on the scenario, because that happened to me where I had Credit Ninja for a long time. I didn't bother to go and get trademarked until I went to Dan, and he goes, somebody trademarked it a year before this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And it was a long fight, and it was like a 3-4 year old fight and a lot of money involved. And Dan and I just got on the phone and go, you know what, let's just drop that. We don't want to deal with being aligned with that brand because they have predatory lending. And then we just decided not to stop the bleeding. So my question is, first use stronger or getting the trademark stronger?
It's a combination of both. So first use will give you what's called senior use, or being a senior user or the prior user. So that will go a long way. Now, if you are the senior user but then apply for an application after somebody else, you have a kind of a winnable fight, but uphill fight. But the other problem is you kind of split your rights, because once you submit an application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, that application is for rights nationwide, so across all 50 states, okay? Even if you haven't done business in all 50 states. So if you have unregistered rights, basically you only get rights in the businesses in the states that you've done business with. So if you submit an application and are able to successfully obtain rights as a senior user, as a junior applicant, for lack of a better term, then you kind of one, you're going to have to go through a battle because now you're going to have to go fight the person that has the registration. And you basically have to tell them, hey, I used this before you in California, Texas, in Alaska, in Alabama. All right, those are only states. So I get those rights in those states, but you get rights in all the other states. You really don't want to have to do that because you are
That's why
only,
I
you
got
can
two
have a,
quick trips.
right,
For
right.
real.
It's possible. Yeah. You kind of don't want to have to handle with all that if you can avoid it. Right. And so that's why it's really important that to submit your application as soon as you are ready, willing, and able to do it. I had one client come to me and she said, okay, I want to trademark this name. And I said, okay, all right. So I did a quick and dirty search for it. I told her, hey, someone else has got this registered. And she said, hey, I know the person that owns this. I told him about this name 10 years ago and I didn't register it. And the other person registered. So now they're at risk of trademark infringement, unfortunately. Right. And so that's why it's important to, now I get everyone's startup and so many resources that were available. But if your name is important to you, if your branding is important to you, then think of it as an investment and then make sure you monetize it as you can so that you can make your money back quickly in the investment way. And I'll tell you how short the window is. I had a client, I sent them the application for signature. They sat on it on a couple of days for whatever reason. We got it back, we submitted it. We get an office action saying, hey, someone else applied for it before you. It's actually one of their competitors. It was 2 days before we submitted our application. They submitted their application 2 days. Now, my client is the senior user. They've been using it for a long time as a common law unregistered use. But now we have an uphill battle. We've got to fight the other side and say, hey, no, we've been using it before you. But we could have avoided all this fight if you just signed it like 4 days earlier. So that's to tell you, it comes down, whether it's an easy fight or an uphill fight, it can kind of come down just to minutes because of how fast applications can get in.
I know that a lot of people are talking about blockchain technology and real estate and all kind of, different ways. Is there any talk of using blockchain technology in trademarks?
There might be. One of the things about blockchain is obviously it's the public record, right? And I know in real estate, this has always been a kind of a hypothetical use application where, hey, we don't need the recorder's office anymore, or eventually, because now everyone will know where all the deeds have been recorded and it's public information and we can do it. So I haven't heard any chatter about replacing the registry or trademark database with it, but it's a feasible use to use the blockchain for trademark registries in the future. I don't know exactly how it would be implemented, but because essentially a public ledger in one sense for trademark registries. There's a hypothetical use to use the blockchain to register your trademarks, but there's still a lot of human elements involved. There's always the examining attorney still there that still needs to review the application. So I think until that particular part is removed, which I think is going to be a very long time, with all the advancements of AI, I think it's going to be a very long time, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you think. Like, fortunate for me, because then I'll still have a job. But it'll be a long time until AI replaces very specific white collar jobs like attorneys. But I'm very excited to see how blockchains affects my industry because, make it more efficient and deliver more value to our clients.
Yeah, I think you would still have to have someone to put it on the blockchain for you. That's not going to be probably, I don't know, maybe it's going to be more simple than it seems, but probably the average person won't know how to do it. I'm thinking you're always going to be having some job security there, Dan. Yeah, I think you're safe on that one. So, and I want to open it up to the audience for some questions, but I did want to also let you talk about your book. So, you have a book out, Making Your Mark, and it's for businesses and entrepreneurs wanting to protect their brand. And where can we buy your book?
Yeah. So my free gift to all the listeners here, you can get a free electronic copy at the URL. It's in my profile, but it's www.mytmbook.com. You can download your free electronic. It's a pretty quick read. I don't try to make it too legalese or too nerdy. So hopefully, one of my gifts, I've been told, is to explain very arcane legal concepts to plain English. So hopefully I've done that here to you guys today and demystified some of the trademark process and ideas and what it would take to, quickly get your application through as fast as you can.
You
Yes, for
certainly
sure.
did. I was going to say, I can tell why credit likes you so much. You're so smooth at this, and I find a lot of this fascinating. So I appreciate it, you bringing it down to a level that we can all understand. Look at, there we go. So making your mark, you guys, making your mark. And remember, Dan just told you that the whole audience today is going to get a free digital download. And again, you're going to find that. Make sure I got this right. It's mytmbook.com. Is that right?
Correct.
Nigel or Paul, can one of you guys put that link at the top?
It's in the chat, Wendy.
It's in the
Yeah,
chat.
we're
Okay.
just not, and that's why I said I want to repeat it one more time, you guys.
Yeah.
It's it just isn't working at the top today, but it's mytmbook.com. And again, I just said it a lot of times. I want to make sure everyone can find it. And Dan, thank you so much for your generosity today. That was so cool of you to share.
Yeah, my
Also,
pleasure.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, obviously I have the book out there.
I'm in the chat again.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel. And he's going to put it in the chat for us.
Yeah, sure. So I have a YouTube channel with lots of videos on setting up companies and trademarks. If you just look up legal tips for smart entrepreneurs, you'll see the smooth face on there in the banner. And there's a playlist specifically for trademarks. So if you want to learn more about trademarks and how to get one for your company, obviously you can download the book and then check out my YouTube videos on the internet.
Thank you very much. And I did want to say welcome to the room, Nelson and Jonathan Bing and everyone that's come in today. We do appreciate you joining us. Does anyone have any questions for Dan today about trademark or any other questions that you may have about your brand?
Dan, I have a quick question. If you try to trademark something that has the familiarity, like we have a company and the princes, William and Harry, are part of our name, and we could not mention anything about royalty or there would be a lawsuit. What do you, now we've tried, now we've filed for trademark 3 times now for that name and haven't got confirmation. What do you recommend doing in a situation like that?
Yeah, so with kind of famous names, those are more challenging because typically you need to get permission from that party. And without having to dig more into your situation, you might have to consider rebranding. I had the situation with another client. They were trying to play, their name was very, very similar to another famous person, but they didn't have any relation. It just kind of happened to have a very similar pronunciation. Unfortunately, they cannot overcome the trademark office objections in trying to get it. And so at that point, they're just not getting the trademark and they kind of dropped it. But they kept using the name in a sense. So knock on wood, they haven't got a cease and desist from that particular famous person. So you kind of have that risk as well. The Royals, I think, well, William and Harry, they may or may not be enforcing the trademark. So it kind of, enforcement is kind of like jaywalking if you think about it. It's like, yeah, technically it's illegal, but like the cops don't always give you a ticket, right? So, but you always have a risk of either getting a ticket or get hit by a car. So you kind of just do it at your own peril in a sense.
There you have it. Dan, William and Harry are also common names. So I was like, how can they trademark that? But anyway, I guess they're going to give us some difficulty over it. Does anyone else have any questions for Dan? Also, I know that you do franchising. You do franchising, you do international trademarks. Are there any other areas that you specialize in, or is that enough? It sounds like that's a lot.
So we only focus on a couple of areas. So one is company formation. So we set up a lot of LLCs and corporations and advise our clients like what's the best state to form in. Trademarks, obviously, as we discussed today, is one of our practice areas. Franchising, as you mentioned. So one of the first steps in the franchising process is to secure your trademark, because when you franchise, you're essentially licensing or allowing someone else to use the brand to open up a restaurant, is the most common example that we all know of. And then we also do fractional general counsel. So for companies, maybe you've heard of fractional CFO, right? CPAs or other accounting professionals offer the service. So we offer a very similar service for companies or business owners that maybe don't need the full-time help or full-time in-house lawyer for their business, but they want someone available to get to know their business better, to strategize from time to time and say, hey, Dan, I'm working on this deal. Can you kind of help me analyze it? Or I'm doing this. Can you give me your thoughts? We'll make ourselves available to our clients to strategize various scenarios and assist them with their business. So that's our fractional general counsel program. So those are really, obviously we do contracts as well as part and parcel of our business practice. So those are really the areas that we try to focus on, and succession planning for our clients. So a lot of business owners built a very successful business. They have partners. And one of the things is like, okay, how do we keep the business among the partners? Like one of us passes away. My wife doesn't know anything about the business, right? So is it really beneficial to the other partners for my wife, who doesn't know anything about the business, to be a company owner? Now, we can set it up where she gets compensated for the work that I've done after I passed away, and my part can be bought out. But it's really important for businesses to set up these kind of estate plans, if you think about their wills, business wills, so that in the case of death or disability or exit, there's a mechanism to be bought out, or a succession plan to be kicked in without a major legal battle when that time comes.
I have a question for Dan. You've recently moved to Thailand, which is in a different time zone, a different country. How hard is it for you to practice law over in another? I know time difference is one of the challenge. Do you have any other challenges that by working overseas versus being in US soil?
Yeah, not particularly. Even when I was back in the United States, a lot of it was remote. I can probably count on one hand how many times I saw people in person, especially after COVID, just because most of our business lives went to Zoom and email and to phone call. And so even after COVID, I was working. I really rarely saw clients in person. I had the opportunity to do this and kind of really, a lot of people think it's just a vacation. Like, no, this, like, I live here and I do my business from here, and I work too. But outside of the time zone differences, nothing really has changed other than, I've expanded my network too. Obviously now I've met a lot of business people out here, and really to benefit my clients and my network as well, to have a person on the ground here to make connections whenever possible and to help my network expand their business.
Yeah, it's so interesting you're in Thailand. Rhett and I have a lot of friends that are talking about moving to Thailand, the expat place to be. This is totally off the subject here from trademarks, but do you see a lot of Americans moving to Thailand? Seems like that's a popular thing happening right now.
Yeah. There's a very large expat community here. So not just Americans, Australians, other Europeans as well. Obviously, cost of living is much less here than in most Western world, especially healthcare. Healthcare is fantastic here. So I'll tell you, like we went, going to the doctor back in the United States, right? Go in, check up, got to pay the copay, right? And that's in the room, and you kind of wait for your name. And then, okay, you got a prescription for this. All right, they got to send it down to CVS, and I got to go drive to the other CVS to go get it, right? And so it's kind of okay. So the other day, I took my son to the doctor because he was having some issue. No appointment. We kind of just walked in, saw the doctor probably within 20 minutes, did a quick examination. So, okay, you got a prescription. So we went to go check out, pay the doctor bill, and then the next counter is when they fill the prescription.
Wow.
And I was in and out probably like within the hour, no appointment. And so, and when people say the healthcare system is broken in America, and I've seen it on the other side too, it's like this is how it should be everywhere. So cost of living is much less. Yes, there's a large expat community, so a lot of people think, you don't speak the language. There's something to be said about full immersion. I've seen Westerners who live there for 20 years pick up the language. It's not easy. but you can do it. And you can certainly live here without having mastered or being fluent in the local language. Lots of people speak English here. And public transportation, this particular city is very good. They have SkyTrain and underground trains. So well, that's one of the reasons why we picked the city, because of the good public infrastructure
And that's in
available. And
Bangkok.
it is in
Is that
Bangkok. Yeah.
Bangkok? Okay, yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of there's this very specific retirement visa available. The government has set it up to attract, retirees here, right? And to make certain things available to them so that they
So,
can live here long term.
That's an
so
interesting one.
Dan, that's a great question. So for healthcare, is it universal healthcare? Do you have specific healthcare just like the U.S.? I mean, is it like Sweden, Canada? Is Thailand different? Because that's a huge part of, some of the problems with the United States. What is the healthcare system in Thailand?
Yeah, there's the public healthcare system for Thai nationals, so they do have universal healthcare, but for expats, typically you got to buy insurance, but it's really affordable on kind of, for the most part, on a cash basis. Like just visiting the doctor, getting prescriptions, uh, it's much less than what you would pay back for in the United States. So, like for us, when I was I have insurance, so we covered for kind of catastrophic stuff. All the other stuff I pay out of pocket. Eye exam, I think I paid like $40 or $50 for the eye exam, and other vaccinations as required. Vaccination is a little bit different because usually it's like flu shots are kind of covered, right, by insurance, so you don't feel the pinch at home. So you pay out of pocket here. So typically it depends on the plan you have, but typically, well, for us, we just pay out of pocket for the normal day to day. I got a cold, I got to go see the doctor type stuff. We're covered for catastrophic, and again, it's very reasonable in terms of day to day. And their healthcare is excellent. Thailand is known for medical tourism, so lots of people come here just for required and elective, procedures.
That's what I was going to
And
ask about.
yeah. So one of my business colleagues here, um, they are setting up a platform for cosmetic surgery. Like they say, it's like Agoda for cosmetic surgery. So Agoda is a very popular app out here. It's like Priceline and Orbit type thing, but it's for elective surgery. So facelifts and tummy tucks and all that. So they just created this app so you can go here, try to find the best hospital. And from my understanding, obviously I haven't gone through this particular procedure, but for kind of cosmetic surgery, they'll kind of roll out the red carpet for here. National hospitals, very high standards. Come here, uh, they'll book you in a very nice hotel nearby, so you don't have to go very far. Nurse will come to you pretty much every day to check up on you until you're ready to go. And so healthcare is very good and very reasonable here.
Well, listen, I could see us talking about expat all day. We may have you back on the Power Hour for a totally different topic because I could see us talking about that a lot. And hey, Rhett and I might be coming to see you. We're talking about checking out Thailand for retirement. That was definitely something.
And also, don't want to interrupt you, but in the
No, go
chat,
ahead.
I put Dan's information. So if you go into the chat, you could just screenshot that, contact his office, book a call, and they're very organized. Once you book a call in, you just get on the calendar, and then you'll get on a discovery call and basically describe what is it that you want to achieve, and he'll reverse engineer all that. But he's very organized, on top of it, very responsive. So I just wanted to add that. But Dan, real quick question: since you
Also,
are working in Thailand, what is the rule that do you have to come back to the US? How often, just to make sure that your license is valid and stuff? I'm just curious how that works, especially professionals like doctors or lawyers.
Yeah, so for us, we don't have any particular residency or kind of foot on the ground requirements. So I'm licensed by the State Bar of California. As long as you pay your money and you do your continuing education, which is due every 3 years, they're willing to take my money and continue to give me my license. And so, yeah, I've met a handful of United States licensed attorneys based out of Bangkok now. And so it's the world is getting smaller, as with Zoom and Chatter app and things like that. And so there's a remote work and remote business, even as a service business like mine, right? Is doable. Hopefully it'll be doable for a very long time. And continue to explore the world is really what we're trying to do, and show our kids that there's a world outside of what we're living in California, and really expand their horizons, and really challenge them as human beings. Is like, hey, it's not sunshines and rainbows.
Well,
That's
the cool
where you're
part
at.
is Dan Nelson is on the app. He is the creator of the Chatter app. I don't know if he's available to say hi, but
Yes,
he's
he has
actually.
a question in the chat, actually.
Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Nelson had asked if Dan also handled patents. I don't know if he's able to talk right now, but I noticed that he did put that in the chat.
Yeah, I specifically don't handle patents. I have very good friends that handle patents. So if you want a referral, I'm happy to give it to you. And in terms of strategy sessions, you guys are not my friends here. I typically charge for consultations. So if you came to me off the street and say, "Dan, I want to talk to you," I would charge for that. But if you want a complimentary, I'll pay for this consultation, see how I can help you, or any other way. I'm happy to give everyone here a complimentary consultation to see how it can help. And so just reach out to me,
Oh, wow.
and you'll get a very special link to book that time.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a
Thank you,
that's a
Dan.
good,
Huge.
that's a great gift. You don't understand. Dan does.
That's
When I get on
big.
the call with him, the clock ticks, man. How do you do that? The next time that we do get onto Chatter, I'm actually gonna be in Thailand with Dan hanging out, and since it works over there, this is a really good test that Chatter works overseas. So
It's
I'm just
great.
excited about this. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming in. We're close to the 1 hour mark. We usually run over about 15 minutes because the first 10 to 15 minutes to make sure that people have time to come in. But we really appreciate you. And we've learned so much about trademark, intellectual property, branding, and so forth. And we want to have you back, especially talking about LLC and trust and all that. That's something that we need to understand, and how we're able to protect our company and our assets and our asses. But anyways,
The next part.
any last words, Dan, before we end this particular podcast?
Hey, so thanks for having me. I love nerding out on these particular topics, and love to share my knowledge, right? Yeah.
Great.
But thank you again. Hey, like, since I'm actually abroad, does this technically make me an international speaker?
Yeah, right.
Yes, you're not.
All right. So
Before we
LinkedIn
all,
profile.
Absolutely.
I do want to get a snapshot of everybody, a screenshot. So everybody keep your eyes open.
I swear I am keeping my eyes open. It's not just me.
So I just want to tell you, Dan, you are not the best looking person out of those four people there. So just that's fine.
You look great.
I'm rarely the best looking person in the room. I'll tell you that.
You look great, Dan. And we appreciate you getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to join us. I mean, seriously, you're a trooper.
Yeah, we forgot that. He hasn't had his eggs yet. Yeah.
Hey, hey, thanks to my big sister Leanne. We kind of know each other a lot better over the few years, and having worked with each other. So kudos to her, and having a very powerful network. So her friends are my friends, and I'm happy to share.
Likewise. Such a pleasure to have you today, Dan. Listen, I know it's only 5 a.m., so I want you to have a great day on purpose. And with that, Wendy, I'm going to let you go ahead and close the room out.
Well, yes, I just wanted to say thank you again to Nelson, Jonathan, all of the others that have come over. Oh, here's Nozzle too. I see him coming in. Oh, it's for shutting down. We appreciate everybody coming over. And I know Jonathan brought some people over from Debate the News. We do appreciate that. Thank you. And again, we do this room every Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for 1 hour, the Power Hour, typically run over about 5 minutes. Please be sure to click all of the profiles of the co-host and Dan, of course, and follow their social media, Instagram, Facebook, all the TikTok and X, all those things, because that's where we typically advertise what our next week's speaker is going to be. That's how you'll keep up with us. So anyway, with that being said, everybody have a good week. Thank you for joining us.